The first thing they took from me was my keys. I remember standing in my own driveway in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, on a damp Monday morning in late September, staring at my locked front door with my keys nowhere to be found. I never misplaced keys. I had lived in that house for 32 years, and every evening I placed them in the ceramic bowl by the entryway table. But that morning the bowl was empty. I turned the cushions upside down, checked my jacket pockets, even the glove compartment of my Camaro. Nothing. That's when I saw Ethan leaning against the mailbox, sipping coffee from a paper cup. My nephew, he smiled faintly, almost too faintly, and said, "Uncle Dan, you're always forgetting things lately, huh?" It was a simple line, delivered casually, but it slid into me like a knife. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. That morning set the tone for everything that followed. What I didn't know was that it wasn't just keys they were stealing. It was my sanity. Or at least, that's what they wanted me, and everyone else to believe. 2 days later, a bill arrived. $2,847.26, supposedly for roofing work I had never ordered. The letterhead looked official enough, stamped with a Cleveland contractor's name, but the job listed full shingle replacement September 19th never happened. I still had the same patched roof from last winter's ice storm. I drove to the contractor SEP's office on Lorraine Avenue to confront them. A woman at the front desk looked puzzled. "Sir, we don't set have you in our system. That invoice isn't set in ours." I slipped the bill into a file folder at home and underlined the date with a red marker. September 21st. One more fracture in my reality. When I brought it up at Sunday dinner, Aunt Lila tilted her head and said sweetly, "Danny, maybe you did order it and just forgot. You has been under stress." Her perfume, sharp lilac and alcohol, stung my nose. My cousin Vanessa added, "We said are just worried that set our all, you know how memory slips run in families." I wanted to shout at them, slam my fist against the table, but instead I swallowed hard and said nothing. Their glances at each other told me this wasn't concern. It was strategy. The locks changed next. On October 1st, I came home from the grocery store with 2 bags of produce and found my key, the spare I had cut after the first loss. No longer fit the front door. I tried again and again, but the teeth didn't catch. I called a locksmith, and when he pried the lock open, he shook his head. "Brand new cylinder. Looks like it was swapped within the week." My name was still on the deed. I had paid off the last mortgage payment in 2019. Yet here I was, standing in my own foyer like an intruder, staring at padlocks on my storage cabinets in the basement. I asked my sister Clara about it. She shrugged. "Maybe you had it done and forgot, Danny." That same line again: "You forgot, you misplaced, you imagined." They wanted me to doubt myself, to question every memory, every habit. Gaslighting so subtle it could be passed off as care. But I knew the truth. One night, around 11 p.m., I heard whispers in the hallway outside my bedroom door. My name, murmured. I opened the door quickly, but no one was there. Just the faint trail of Vanessa's perfume in the air, lingering like evidence. I started jotting everything down in a notebook. Dates, times, receipts, even the sound of the new deadbolt clicking shut behind me. A ledger of sanity, I called it. On October 4th, I wrote, "Phone call overheard. Ethan telling someone his is slipping faster than we thought." And on October 6th, Vanessa rifling through my desk drawer. When confronted, she laughed and said, "Seto, I thought it was the guest drawer." The more they tried to convince me I was losing my mind, the sharper my mind became. But here's the thing. They believed it was working. Every smirk, every exchanged glance at family dinners told me they thought the cracks were showing. They thought their little theater was convincing enough to push me into a corner, maybe even into a home. I let them think it. Because the moment Ethan smirked at me by the mailbox with that coffee cup, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them head on, not yet. I was going to let them build their stage, hang their lights, play their parts. I would nod and stumble and act confused. I would let them believe the performance was mine, when all along it was theirs. So that one day when the curtain finally fell, the whole audience would see them for who they really were. And as I wrote in my ledger that night, I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, I said'll let them think I believe it. The house began answering back in ways I couldn't ignore. I'd lived in that Cleveland Heights colonial for over 3 decades. Every creak in the stairs, every hum of the furnace was familiar. But after the locks changed, the house itself felt like it was betraying me. Take October 3rd, a Tuesday. The kitchen smelled faintly of bleach, though I hadn't cleaned that morning. I reached for my prescription bottle, the one my doctor Patel had given me for my blood pressure, and noticed the label. Same pharmacy, same name, same dosage. But the pills inside weren't the same. They were smaller, chalkier. Maria, my late mother's nurse who still visited me out of loyalty, was the first to spot it. She picked up the bottle, shook it, frowned. "These aren't set what Dr. Patel prescribed," she whispered. "Danny, someone switched them." I checked the refill date. October 3rd, and yet I hadn't been to the pharmacy that day. Someone else had filled it in my name. That night, Maria and I sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. She spread out the pill bottles, comparing them to the receipts I had stashed in my ledger. "Look here," she pointed, tracing her finger across the CVS slip. "This one says 28 tablets at $19.43. But this new one says 20 at $14.89. They didn't even bother to match the counts." My hand trembled as I underlined both numbers in red. I wasn't losing my memory. They were actively rewriting my reality. The next day, I found something worse. An envelope wedged under the front door, bearing the letterhead of North Coast Credit Union. Inside was a refinance quote for my house. Low in amount, $699,842.11. My house was long paid off. Why would I refinance? The note said, "Prepared September 29th, pending signature." I drove straight to the branch on Lee Road, slammed the paper down on the manager's desk, and demanded answers. She scanned the form, then shook her head. "Mr. Carter, this isn't set finalized. It's set just a quote request." "From who?" I asked. She hesitated. "It was submitted online under your name with your address." I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just gaslighting me. They were laying the groundwork to take the house itself. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the refinance letter on my lap, Maria's words echoing in my head. I could hear the house creaking as if it were whispering, warning me. Every wall had ears now. I needed help. Someone who wouldn't dismiss me with a smile and a comment about age. That steps when Maria said, "Danny, you need a lawyer, a real one, not just to defend yourself, but to go on the offensive." I thought about it long and hard. My family thought I was weak, slipping, ready to be signed away like furniture. They thought they had the upper hand. But if they wanted to play contracts and signatures, I could play that game too. On October 7th, I made an appointment with Ruth Feldman, an attorney in Shaker Square with 40 years under her belt. Her reputation was simple. She hated fraud, and she hated bullies. When I slid the refinance letter across her desk, she leaned back, tapping her pen against her glasses. "Mr. Carter," she said slowly, "this is classic undue influence. They're setting you up. First, they make you look incompetent. Then they start moving assets while no one's looking. By the time you realize, the house is gone, the bank accounts are drained, and you're sitting in assisted living wondering what happened." Her words felt like a mirror, reflecting every fear I hadn't voiced. I clenched my jaw. "So what do I do?" Ruth smiled, sharp as glass. "You let them think it stays working. Then we settle build the case while they dig their own graves." That evening, I wrote in my ledger again. October 7th. Met Ruth Feldman. Strategy: pretend to decline. Document everything. Next step: trap them with their own greed. I slipped the refinance quote under the same folder where I'd kept the roofing bill. My evidence pile was growing. As I clicked the folder shut, I whispered again, the same line I'd muttered by the mailbox that first day. "I said'll let them think I believe it." But now, for the first time, I had an ally who believed me. And together we weren't going to just survive this. They were going to choke on their own lies. The thought came to me one night while staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles in the dark. If they wanted my will, then my will would be the noose around their necks. I wasn't naive. I knew what Ethan, Vanessa, and Aunt Lila were circling for. It wasn't me they cared about. It was the house, the equity, the accounts I'd built from 30 years in the auto shop, and the Camaro parts business. To them, I was an obstacle, a signature waiting to be shaken loose. So I gave them a signature, just not the one they expected. It started with a manila envelope I slid across Ruth Feldman's oak desk on October 12th. Inside was my original will, dated 2016 after my mother passed. Ruth tapped it with one long finger. Your existing will is valid, but if they stir circling, we need to strengthen the terms. And we still do it in a way that looks like weakness, but actually protects you. That's when she suggested something brilliant. A sealed addendum, a hidden clause they wouldn't see coming until it was too late. The next step was surveillance. Ruth brought in Curtis, a private investigator with a weathered face and a Nikon slung around his neck. His specialty, catching people in places they didn't belong. Donan, think of me as James Bond, he said, flipping through his notepad. Think of me as the guy who notices the scratches on the lock before you do. Curtis began tracking entries to the house. On October 17th, he sent me his first report. Photos of Ethan slipping into North Coast tidal sepsis at 3:15 p.m., leaving with a folder tucked under his arm. A folder stamped Property Transfer Estimates. That same night, Maria called me in hushed tones. Danny, your cousin was in your medicine cabinet again. I found one of your pill bottles under the sink, half empty. They stir trying to show you, stir careless. I wrote it all in the ledger, date stamped and signed my name beside each entry. If they wanted a paper trail, I'd give them one, just not the kind they could control. Then came the boldest move yet. I requested my own capacity exam. On November 6th at University Hospitals, I sat across from Dr. Kaminsky, a neuropsychologist. He tested my recall, my arithmetic, even asked me to draw a clock. I passed every test. When he handed me the results, his signature at the bottom read, "Patient demonstrates full mental capacity." I slipped the report into a plastic sleeve and filed it in my ledger. Insurance against their whispers. Ruth worked with me on the will sets addendum. Clause 1. Any evidence of undue influence or attempted fraud would void the inheritance for those involved. Clause 2. Assets would transfer instead to the Cleveland Community Trust charity, not family, if coercion was proven. Clause 3. Maria, the nurse who never left my side, would receive a living stipend for her loyalty. I signed it with a steady hand on November 10th. Ruth sealed it in her office safe. Danny, she said, locking it away, this is your ghost note. They one set know it exists until the music stops, and when it does, it said'll be their funeral march. The timing of all this was deliberate. Thanksgiving was approaching, a holiday my family never skipped, no matter how fractured we were. The table was their stage, and this year it would be mine too. I circled November 23rd in red ink in my ledger. Next to it I wrote Truth Table. I didn't want to let the masks slip. At dinner on November 12th, Vanessa asked, "Uncle Dan, did you forget to bring the wine? You always used to." I pretended to blink in confusion, then laughed it off. Must it slipped my mind. Curtis, sitting discreetly in his car outside, snapped a time-stamped photo of Ethan leaving my garage with a box under his arm. Later, I'd learn it contained my old car titles. Every mistake they thought I made was actually bait. Every smirk they shared was another nail in their coffin. That night, after everyone left, I sat by the lake behind the house, the cold November wind cutting against my face. I thought about my mother, how she used to say, "Family can be the people who feed you or the people who starve you." I whispered into the wind, "You wanted my will, well now my will has you written into it, just not the way you think." And when I closed the ledger for the night, I felt a strange calm. Because for the first time I wasn't just documenting their lies. I was scripting their downfall. By mid-November I had mastered the art of pretending. Forgetfulness became my weapon. When I left the back door ajar by accident, I knew Ethan would notice. When I forgot to pay the water bill, I knew Vanessa would find the overdue slip and tuck it in her purse like a trophy. They thought they were building a case against me, but in reality I was feeding them rope. The pills came first. One evening, I deliberately left a decoy pill bottle on the kitchen counter. Identical label, wrong medication. I knew Vanessa snooped in my cabinets when she thought I wasn't looking. Sure enough, within 2 days I caught her slipping the bottle into her tote bag. "Oh, Uncle Dan," she said, when I startled her. "I thought this one was expired. Just trying to help." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but I saw the satisfaction in her eyes. She thought she'd caught me slipping again. I logged it that night, November 14th, 7:32 p.m. Vanessa stole dummy pill bottle. Witness myself. Marked tote bag. Green leather, gold buckle. The ledger was thickening, page by page. The next fracture came through the bank. On November 16th, I got a call from Tessa, a young teller at North Coast Credit Union. Her voice trembled slightly. "Mr. Carter? I thought you should know. Someone tried to withdraw $9,500 from your account today. The request came under your name, but the signature didn't set match. I stopped it and printed a copy of the slip. I drove down to the branch immediately. Tessa handed me the slip through the glass. Ethan's sloppy scrawl, attempting to mimic mine. The date was bold at the top, November 16th, 2022. Amount $9,500. "Thank you," I told her. "Hold on to your copy. You may need it later." I folded the slip carefully and slid it into my ledger. Red ink circled the amount 3 times. Curtis, the PI, delivered his own bombshell the next morning. He'd been staking out North Coast title again. He slid a set of glossy photographs across Ruth's office desk. Ethan, walking into the building at 10:41 a.m. Vanessa joining him 10 minutes later, both leaving with stamped folders. Curtis pointed at one photo. "Notice the document title? I caught just enough. It reads, 'The warranty deed transferred, this bird not even settle anymore.'" Ruth leaned back in her chair. Lips tight. "Danny, they sept trying to sell your house before you scepter even in the ground." Her words hung in the air like smoke. That evening, Maria made me tea while I stared at the flickering lamplight across the living room. "Why do you let them come around at all?" she asked softly. "Because," I said, lifting my eyes to hers, "you can catch a wolf unless you leave the trap baited." She nodded slowly, understanding. On November 18th, I phoned each family member personally. "Thanksgiving sets at my house this year," I said. "I set'll do the turkey, you just bring yourselves." The line went quiet on Aunt Lila Sepsin, then she forced a laugh. "Danny, with everything going on, are you sure you set her up for it?" "But some sure," I said evenly. By then, the decision was made. The truth table was set. For the next few days, I rehearsed my role of forgetful fool. I misplaced my checkbook, left my phone unlocked on the counter, even jotted down passwords on sticky notes that I knew Ethan would glance at. Every slip was intentional, every oversight calculated. Behind it all, Ruth held the sealed addendum. Maria logged every visit, Curtis filled his camera roll, and Tessa kept her copy of the fraud slip safe. My quiet army was gathering strength while my family thought I was unraveling. On November 20th, I wrote one line across the top of my ledger in block letters: "They think they stir winning. Let them." And that night, as I shut the lights off and listened to the padlock click on the basement door, a lock I hadn't placed, one they installed without asking, I smiled in the dark. Because the more they tightened the noose, the more obvious it would be when the rope snapped back on them. By the week of Thanksgiving, the stage was set. All that was left was to bait the final hook. I started with the envelopes. 3 cream-colored envelopes, identical in size, each sealed with a red wax stamp I bought from a hobby shop downtown. I placed them neatly in the top drawer of my desk, half covered with bank statements so they looked carelessly hidden. Each envelope contained a will, except they weren't wills at all. Just decoy pages with my name at the top, followed by gibberish paragraphs about donations to obscure charities and accounts that didn't exist. I left them there knowing Vanessa couldn't resist. The second trap was more personal. I filled an amber pill bottle with Tic Tacs, relabeled it with a forged pharmacy sticker, and set it next to the coffee machine, where Ethan always prowled for late-night brews. A fake dosage, fake refill date, fake everything. That same evening, I heard the faint click of my desk drawer opening. I didn't move. I let the silence do the work. The next morning, one of the decoy envelopes was gone, and when I checked the pill bottle, half the Tic Tacs were missing. Vanessa couldn't help herself. She'd taken the bait like a trout on a line. On November 22nd, the day before Thanksgiving, Ruth stopped by with Maria to finalize everything. She slid a manila folder onto my dining table. Inside was the sealed letter, what I called my Thanksgiving letter. "This stays with me until tomorrow night," Ruth said firmly. "No one sees it until the table is full. Understood?" I nodded. The letter contained the true addendum, the clause that would make every act of their manipulation a blade they'd turned on themselves. Maria, ever the meticulous note-taker, handed me her log. She had written every visit, every whisper she overheard, every time Vanessa accidentally swapped my pill bottles, or Ethan lingered in the basement. Dates, times, even descriptions of perfume in the hallway. "This," she said, tapping the log, "will shut down every lie they try to spin." I took the notebook in my hands and felt its weight. It wasn't just paper, it was my sanity recorded line by line. That night the air outside smelled of snow, though none had fallen yet. I sat by the fireplace with the Camaro keys in my palm, the same keys they'd mocked me for losing weeks earlier. I thought about my mother Sip's words again. "A will isn't Sips about death. It sips about who you trust to live with what you leave behind." I whispered into the crackle of the fire. "Tomorrow we shall see who chokes on trust." Thanksgiving morning came with frost on the windows. The turkey roasted slowly in the oven while I set the long oak table with china plates my mother had once polished every holiday. Each fork, each glass felt like a soldier taking position. By noon they began to arrive. Ethan with his arrogant smirk, Vanessa in a red coat, perfume flooding the air before she even crossed the threshold, Aunt Lila clutching her handbag like it contained her crown jewels. Maria hovered near the kitchen, Ruth seated quietly in the living room with her folder at her side. Curtis, ever the shadow, was parked across the street with his camera trained on my driveway. The house was full. The stage was lit, and I was ready. I caught Vanessa's eyes drifting toward my desk in the study. She didn't know I'd already noticed the missing envelope. I saw the twitch of her smile when she thought no one was looking. Ethan clapped me on the back too hard and said, "Smells good, Uncle Dan. Glad you still remember how to cook." I forced a chuckle. Some things never slip my mind. The words hung heavier than the aroma of turkey. By dusk, as candles flickered against the walls, I excused myself to the study. I let them watch me fumble with the drawer, pull out the remaining 2 envelopes, and tuck them into my jacket pocket like they were priceless. When I returned to the dining room, Vanessa leaned forward. "Uncle Dan, you know you can trust us to take care of things when you consist." Her voice was dripping with false concern, but her eyes were glued to the envelopes in my pocket. I smiled thinly. "Donna Steck worry, Vanessa. Everything's Sep's written down. You Sep see soon enough." That night, after the last guest left, I sat alone in the quiet house. The traps were sprung, the evidence airtight, the letter ready. I opened my ledger and wrote one final note before the showdown. November 23rd. Thanksgiving. They think they've won. Tomorrow the table turns. And with that, I closed the book, slid it into my desk drawer, and whispered into the silence of the house. "Let's see if they can swallow what I set's written for them." The night before Thanksgiving felt like the calm before a storm. My house was too quiet, but the silence wasn't safety. It was surveillance. At 1:13 a.m., I woke to a faint click outside my bedroom. I lay still, my breath shallow. Through the thin gap under the door, a sliver of light flickered, then dimmed, and then I smelled it. Vanessa's perfume. That same overpowering mix of rose and alcohol that clung to her like a warning label. I heard her whisper. Ethan's voice answered, low and hurried. "He Sep's asleep." We self-checked the desk. The boards creaked as they moved down the hallway. I didn't Sep move. I wanted them to think I was oblivious. But I wrote it in my ledger as soon as they slipped out. November 22nd, 1:13 a.m. Ethan and Vanessa in hallway. Whispered, "He's asleep." Perfume confirmed. Purpose desk search. Maria was furious when I told her the next morning. "Danny, They scepter not just circling, they scepter circling like vultures waiting for meat. She showed me her own log, her tight handwriting filling each line. Vanessa entered master bedroom hallway at 1:13 a.m. Strong perfume noted. Our logs mirrored each other like two witnesses writing the same truth. On November 22nd, Curtis delivered another packet of photographs. He'd been following Ethan again. This time, Ethan wasn't at North Coast Title. He was in a diner downtown, leaning across a booth toward Aunt Lila. Curtis had caught the conversation with his parabolic mic. Ethan Sepp's words, captured clear as day. We Sepp push him at Thanksgiving. He Sepp's almost ready to sign. Once he does, we split it 3 ways. When Curtis played me the recording in Ruth's office, I felt something strange, not anger, not fear, certainty. Their noose was already tightening. Ruth leaned forward, steepling her fingers. Tomorrow is the performance. Don't confront them early. Let them act on their arrogance. I hest I'll have the letter. You I'll have the evidence. Maria and Curtis will corroborate. All we need is their overconfidence to expose itself. I nodded, though my stomach churned. My mother used to say, truth doesn't knock, it breaks down the door. Tomorrow it would. That evening, the intrusions escalated. I came downstairs to find my basement door padlocked again. I hadn't put it there. The shiny brass lock gleamed against the old wood like a threat. I stood staring at it until Ethan appeared behind me, holding a glass of water. Oh, that? He said casually. I thought you said the basement was unsafe. Just trying to help. His smirk betrayed him. I tilted my head and answered, Thank you, Ethan. Always looking out for me. I let him believe I bought it. Then I logged it. November 22nd. Basement padlocked by Ethan. Claimed safety witness self. As Thanksgiving morning approached, the house became a theater of lies. Vanessa fussed over the table settings, her perfume choking the air. Aunt Lila followed me room to room, pretending concern. Ethan helped in the kitchen, but kept glancing at the study door. They thought I was stumbling toward their trap. What they didn't know was that every fork on that table hid a shadow. Maria ready with her log, Ruth ready with her folder, Curtis parked outside with a recorder running. That night, after they all left, I walked the halls alone. The smell of Vanessa's perfume still clung to the air like smoke after a fire. I paused outside the study, placed my hand on the doorframe, and whispered, You want my house? Tomorrow this house will speak for itself. Then I slid the recorder beneath the dining table, taped it against the underside, and pressed record. For once the lies in the air wouldn't vanish. They'd be captured, frozen. And by tomorrow evening the whole family would hear them played back. Thanksgiving Day, November 23rd, 2022. The day my dining table stopped being a place for turkey and became a courtroom. The morning started as they expected. I bumbled around the kitchen, muttering about too much time and forgetting the stuffing. Ethan chuckled behind my back. Vanessa whispered to Aunt Layla. He kept slipping worse than last year. But they didn't know the recorder was already rolling beneath the oak table, red light blinking quietly. By 3 o'clock, the house was full. Candles flickered. The turkey sat golden brown at the center of the table. My ledger rested on the buffet nearby, disguised as a recipe book. Maria poured wine, her notebook tucked discreetly in her apron. Ruth Feldman sat in the living room with her folder on her lap, her calm presence a silent promise. Curtis's car remained stationed outside, camera lens trained on my window. The wolves had entered the pen, and the gate was closed. Dinner began as expected. Small talk, laughter that wasn't set real. Ethan carved the turkey with exaggerated care. Vanessa passed the gravy boat. Aunt Lila gave a brittle toast. To family, and to keeping what matters most, safe. The way she emphasized safe made Maria shoot me a glance. My fork trembled in my hand, not from fear but from anticipation. I let them run their script first. Vanessa leaned across the table, her perfume stifling. Uncle Dan, I noticed you been misplacing things. Maybe it's siftest time we talk about the will, just to make sure everything's siftest in order, you know? Ethan followed up, voice smooth. We could help take the burden off your shoulders. And then Aunt Lila, the grand matriarch act. Daniel, you can trust us. Your mother would have wanted the family to carry the torch. I let the silence linger, their words hanging in the candlelight. Then I placed my fork down carefully and said, You set her right. My mother would have wanted the truth carried. I stood, crossed to the buffet, and lifted the ledger. November 16th, I read. Flipping to a page. Fraudulent withdrawal attempt at North Coast Credit Union. Amount $9,500. Ethan Carter Sips handwriting. Tessa, the teller, has the copy. Ethan froze, color draining from his face. November 14th, I continued. Vanessa Carter removed decoy pill bottle from kitchen counter. Witness myself. Evidence. Her green tote bag. Vanessa said's jaw tightened. I laid the refinance letter on the table next, the one for $699,842. And here we have an attempted refinance of my paid-off house. Submitted online, under my name, without my consent. I watched their smiles collapse one by one. Maria stepped forward, holding her log. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. I recorded every visit, every pill swap. Every time perfume lingered in the hallway at 1:13 a.m., I have 37 entries. She placed the log on the table with a sharp smack. Curtis entered then, camera in hand, hat still on his head. He laid a stack of photographs by the cranberry sauce. Ethan at North Coast Title, Vanessa at the diner, Aunt Leela leaning in with conspiratorial eyes. I caught the audio too, Curtis said flatly. He pulled out a small player and pressed play. Ethan Deft's voice filled the dining room. We settle push him at Thanksgiving. Once he signs, we split it 3 ways. The sound was damning, echoing against the walls of the house they'd tried to steal. Ethan slammed his fist against the table. This is ridiculous. You set her framing us. I leaned forward, voice calm. Framing you? You framed yourselves. I just collected the evidence. Then I nodded to Ruth. She rose slowly, carrying the sealed envelope. She placed it in the center of the table like a gavel in a judge's hand. This, she said, is Mr. Carter's official will addendum, signed and notarized. She broke the seal with deliberate care and unfolded the letter. Her voice carried, in the event of undue influence, coercion, or fraud by family members, all assets, including the house, accounts, and vehicles, shall be transferred to the Cleveland Community Trust. Additionally, the loyal caretaker Maria Alvarez shall receive a lifetime stipend for her service. The room fell silent. Forks froze midair. The turkey cooled untouched. Vanessa whispered, almost to herself, Charity, you set give it all to charity? I looked her dead in the eyes. Better charity than vultures. Chaos erupted. Ethan shouted, You can set do this. Aunt Lila Sepp's voice cracked as she begged, Danny, we set family. Vanessa hissed under her breath. This isn't set fair. But Ruth spoke over them, firm as a judge. The addendum is legally binding, and with the corroborating evidence from Mr. Carter Sepp's ledger, Miss Alvarez Sepp's logs, Mr. Curtis Sepp's surveillance, and Mr. Kaminsky Sepp's capacity exam, no court will ever side with you. I pulled my phone from my pocket, pressed speaker, and dialed Ruth's office line. Her assistant answered. Feldman and Associates. Put Ruth's declaration on file, I said into the phone, letting them all hear, effective immediately. The silence afterward was thick. The wolves were caged. I looked each of them in the eye and said, You wanted me to believe I was losing my mind. Instead, you lost everything you thought you could steal. And then I lifted my glass, not in toast, but in verdict, to truth. May it always ruin the lies. The day after Thanksgiving, the house felt different, lighter, almost as if the walls themselves had exhaled. But the battlefield wasn't clear just yet. The war had only shifted arenas. The table may have delivered the verdict, but I still had to make it official. Paper trails had to be filed, signatures stamped, evidence notarized. If my family wanted to turn my home into a courtroom, I was ready to carry the trial into the real one. On November 25th, Maria came by early with her logbook. She'd already taken it to a notary downtown. Each entry was stamped and signed. her meticulous handwriting frozen into legal fact. Now it can't be denied, she said, sliding the certified pages onto my desk. I placed them in a binder alongside the fraud slip, Curtis's photographs, and Dr. Kaminsky's exam results. Piece by piece, the puzzle was transforming into a wall they couldn't climb. That weekend, Ruth filed the first set of restraining orders. Ethan, Vanessa, and Aunt Lila would no longer be allowed within 50 feet of my property. Think of it as drawing a boundary line in concrete, she told me over the phone. They can scream all they want on the other side of it, but they can cross it. I stood at the window that evening, watching the last leaves fall onto the driveway. For the first time in weeks, I didn't expect to smell Vanessa's perfume in the hall or hear Ethan's footsteps by the study door. The silence wasn't surveillance anymore, it was safety. But silence never lasts with people like them. On November 28th, Ethan broke it with a text. Uncle Dan, we went too far. Please let Sips fix this as a family. I so come by, just us, no lawyers. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing my reply. No, boundaries aren't set negotiable, not anymore. I hit send without hesitation. Maria, when I showed her, just nodded. That sips the cold they need to feel. The next day, Ruth went further. She filed bar complaints against the attorney Ethan had used to draft the refinance application. If he knowingly assisted in fraud, his license is on the line, she explained. Curtis, ever thorough, handed me a flash drive of recordings he hadn't shown before. One was Vanessa on a phone call outside my house. Don't worry, once he sets in assisted living, the house is ours. He set's already halfway gone. Listening to it, my jaw clenched. But not from hurt anymore. From resolve. December 1st brought frost to the windows again. Maria and I sat at the kitchen table with coffee as she notarized one last statement, her personal testimony of what she'd witnessed over the months. Her eyes softened as she slid the paper toward me. Danny, you are not just proving you are sane. You are proving you are stronger than they ever gave you credit for. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Stronger because you stood with me. On December 2nd, I got another message, this time from Aunt Lila. A brittle email with the subject line, Family Matters. Inside it read, Danny, we all make mistakes. Don't let outsiders drive us apart. Remember, blood is thicker than water. I closed the email without responding, because blood may be thicker than water, but betrayal is thicker than both. December 3rd arrived, the first court hearing. The binder Ruth had prepared was heavier than any turkey I'd ever roasted. Evidence, affidavits, logs, photographs, recordings, all neatly tabbed and labeled. I looked at the cover page before walking into the courthouse. Carter v. Carter, Petition for Protective Orders, Case Hash 2022-1184. The ashes of Thanksgiving still smoldered, but I was already striking the next match. As I left the courthouse that day, the cold wind whipped at my coat. My phone buzzed with another desperate text from Ethan. Uncle Don said do this, you said'll regret it. I typed back 3 words. See you inside. And for the first time, I felt the revenge wasn't just personal. It was becoming justice, brick by brick. December 3rd was just the prelude. The real trial, the one that would decide not only my house, but my name, my sanity, was set for December 9th, 2022. That morning, the courthouse in downtown Cleveland felt like a cathedral. The marble floors echoed with every step, and the air smelled faintly of paper and old wood. I carried the binder Ruth had prepared, heavy enough to anchor me. The case was listed on the docket as Carter vs. Carter. That alone made me want to laugh. Family versus family. Blood versus betrayal. Inside courtroom 4B, Judge Thompson presided. A tall man with silver hair, known for his intolerance of theatrics. If you come in here with smoke and mirrors, Ruth had warned me, he's silk cut you down to size. Ethan sat at the respondent's table, his tie too tight, sweat already beading at his forehead. Vanessa beside him, lips pursed, arms crossed. Aunt Lila whispered furiously into their attorney's ear. I sat at the petitioner's table with Ruth at my side. Maria was behind us, her log notarized and ready. Curtis leaned against the back wall, camera bag at his feet, a silent sentinel. The proceedings began. Ethan's lawyer started first, painting me as a confused old man, slipping into dementia, in need of protection from myself. He waved his hand at me like I was already a ghost. "Mr. Carter," he said, "recently misplaced keys, unpaid bills, forgotten prescriptions. The evidence points to cognitive decline." I sat silently, letting him dig the hole. Then Ruth rose. She adjusted her glasses, her voice clear. "Your Honor, the defense would have you believe Mr. Carter is losing his mind. Let me show you what they actually lost. Truth." She began laying out the binder piece by piece. Exhibit A, the fraudulent roofing bill for $2,847.26. Ruth handed it to the judge. Company verified it never issued this invoice forgery. Exhibit B, the $699,842 refinance. Quote, submitted online under Mr. Carter Sip's name, without his consent. Exhibit C, the fraud slip from November 16th. Attempted withdrawal of $9,500. Signature didn't set match. Teller stopped it. Judge Thompson raised his brow at that one. $9,500 is an oddly specific amount, just under the threshold for automatic fraud detection. Ruth nodded. Exactly, Your Honor. They knew what they were doing. Then came the testimony. Maria took the stand first. Her voice trembled, but she never faltered. I witnessed Vanessa switching pill bottles. I logged every visit, every whisper in the hallway. I notarized my log on November 25th. She held up the stamped notebook. The clerk took it, and the judge examined the seal. Curtis followed, producing his photographs and audio recordings. The diner conversation played through the courtroom speakers. Ethan Stell's voice. "Day we Betel push him at Thanksgiving. Once he signs, we split it 3 ways." The sound of Ethan's own voice filled the courtroom like thunder. He squirmed in his chair. Finally, Ruth pulled out the masterstroke. My capacity exam, conducted November 6th by Dr. Kaminsky at University Hospitals, she said, handing the judge the signed report. Results, patient demonstrates full mental capacity. The judge read it silently, then looked up at me. His eyes were sharp, but his tones softened. "Mr. Carter, you was been accused of decline. Tell me, in your own words, how lucid are you today?" I stood slowly, gripping the rail. My voice carried steady. "Your Honor, they wanted me to think I was losing my mind. They wanted you to think it too, but I never lost it. I wrote everything down, dates, amounts, places, because I knew one day I'd be standing here proving that I wasn't crazy. They wanted my house, my life's work, but all they proved was that greed makes you blind. I am not blind. I am painfully lucid." The courtroom fell into silence. Even the clerk stopped typing. Judge Thompson cleared his throat. "I have heard enough." He stacked the evidence in front of him, one pile higher than the next, then spoke in crisp sentences. 1. The petition for restraining orders is granted. Ethan Carter, Vanessa Carter, and Lila Carter are barred from approaching the petitioner Sefta's residence. 2. Assets belonging to Mr. Daniel Carter are frozen from transfer, refinance, or withdrawal by any party other than himself. 3. The court recognizes the petitioner as fully competent. In fact, Mr. Carter Sip's clarity is remarkable. His ledger alone is a model of record keeping. He banged his gavel. Case adjourned. The echo of that gavel was sweeter than any holiday carol. I gathered my binder, nodded to Ruth, and walked out of courtroom 4B with my head high. Ethan shouted after me, but his words were drowned in the shuffle of feet and the clang of the gavel still ringing. Outside, the winter sun cut through the clouds. I pulled my phone from my pocket, dialed Maria, and said just 2 words. "Start the Camaro." The engine roared to life in the parking lot, and as I slid into the driver's seat, I realized my sanity wasn't just signed and sealed. The morning after the courtroom verdict, I stood in the foyer of my house, keys in hand. Real keys, mine. The brass was warm against my palm, like the house itself was relieved to belong to me again. For weeks the walls had whispered betrayal. Every creak felt like an intrusion. But now, as the winter sun streamed through the lace curtains, the air was different. The house breathed again. My first act was simple. I changed the locks, not once but twice. By noon, every door had a new cylinder, every window latch inspected. The locksmith, a grizzled man named Frank, chuckled as he handed me the fresh set. "You sure are thorough," he said. "I have to be," I replied. "This house isn't set just wood and brick. It sets my life sets work." When the last lock clicked shut, I felt a weight lift off my chest. That evening, Maria came by with groceries. She placed a bouquet of white lilies on the counter, my mother's favorite. "Thought she deserved her place back in this home, too," she said softly. Together we rehung my mother's photo above the mantel. For weeks it had been tucked away in a drawer after Vanessa once suggested, "Maybe it's time to declutter." Now the photo glowed in the firelight. Her eyes kind, her presence restored. I whispered, "We did it, Mom. We protected what you left behind." Not everything needed to be kept, though. That night, I burned the decoy wills in the fireplace. The wax seals curled and cracked, flames licking away the false legacies I'd planted. Watching them turn to ash felt like watching their lies disintegrate. But the ledger, the real record, I kept. Not as a weapon anymore, but as a reminder of how close I'd come to losing myself. On December 12th, I invited Ruth and Curtis over for coffee. We sat in the living room, snow falling softly outside, the Camaro parked in the drive like a loyal sentinel. Ruth sipped from her mug. "Danny, I hope you understand something important. This wasn't set just revenge. This was justice. You didn't set destroy them. You exposed them." Curtis added, "They destroyed themselves the second they thought greed was smarter than truth." Their words sank deep. Revenge had been my fuel, yes, but justice was the flame that burned clean. Later that night, alone again, I walked the halls slowly, my footsteps echoing in rhythm with the ticking clock. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched. No perfume in the air, no padlocks that weren't mine, no forged invoices waiting in the mailbox. Just silence. My silence. And I realized something: I didn't need the settlement money or the apology letters to feel whole. The victory was already here, in the way the house exhaled with me, in the way every key fit again. I sat by the fireplace, the Camaro keys resting beside me, and wrote the final line in my ledger for the year, December 12th. The house breathes again, so do I. And when I closed the book, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt free. By January, the legal dust had settled, but not the kind anyone brags about over dinner. There were no champagne toasts, no family handshakes, just signatures, sealed envelopes, and bitterness that clung like smoke. The first agreement came through Ethan's lawyer on January 4th. He signed a no-contact order without protest. The same nephew who once leaned against my mailbox, smirking now, couldn't come within 50 feet of my property. His text messages, pleading, threatening, bargaining, were already evidence. Now they were just noise on a blocked list. Vanessa's turn came next. On January 9th, she arrived at Ruth's office, forced into civility by the weight of discovery. She handed over a typed apology letter, 2 pages of rehearsed regret that smelled of ink but not sincerity. "I never meant harm, Uncle Dan. I was misguided, caught up in things bigger than me." I skimmed it once, then set it down. "This isn't sift an apology," I told Ruth later. "It sips a performance." Ruth smiled thinly. "Then let her perform for the record. That sip's all we need." Aunt Lillisep's gesture was the pettiest of all. On January 12th, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a tin of cookies, brittle and overbaked, with a note that read, "Family should forgive, Lilla." I didn't eat a single one. Instead, I placed the tin on the shelf in the garage, a relic of what family meant when love had curdled into control. Meanwhile, I began moving forward. On January 15th, I listed the Camaro for sale. It wasn't an easy decision. The car was a piece of me, a symbol of the years I'd built with grease on my hands and pride in my chest. But sometimes freedom requires letting go of anchors, even beloved ones. By February, it sold for $86,000. Cashier's check in hand. I deposited it into the very bank account Ethan had tried to drain. When the teller asked, "Any special purpose for this deposit, Mr. Carter?" I said, "Yes, it SEPs for breathing room." The money didn't buy revenge. It bought closure. I paid off lingering debts, repaired the roof with a legitimate contractor, and donated a portion to the Cleveland Community Trust. The very clause that had scared them most now became real, not from obligation but from choice. And that felt better than any courtroom gavel. Maria stopped by often, her laughter filling the kitchen where once whispers had lived. One evening she poured tea and said, "You notice something, Danny? The house is quiet now. Not empty, just quiet." She was right. For the first time, quiet didn't mean loneliness. It meant peace. But not every scar fades neatly. Sometimes I'd still smell phantom perfume in the hallway or hear an imagined click at the door. Trauma leaves echoes, even when the culprits are gone. One night in February, I walked down to the lake, the cold air biting at my lungs. I stood there holding the Camaro keys one last time before tossing them into the water. The splash echoed, then disappeared into ripples that caught the moonlight. That was my final goodbye. Not to the car, but to the weight of everything tied to it. As I walked back to the house, I thought, this is the kind of settlement no one brags about. No one wins trophies for surviving betrayal. No one hangs certificates for reclaiming sanity. But I didn't need a trophy. My settlement was simpler: freedom from their reach, the keys to my house, and the knowledge that when they tried to write me off, I rewrote the ending myself. Christmas Eve arrived with snow dusting the windowsills and the lake frozen in silence. The house was warm, the fireplace crackling, Maria's laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen as she prepared tea. For the first time in months, the holidays didn't feel like a battlefield. They felt like home again. Then the mail arrived. Among the usual envelopes, bills, holiday cards from old friends, was one I recognized instantly. The handwriting sharp, cursive, unmistakably Aunt Leela's. My breath caught before I even opened it. Inside was a single card. On the front, a faded winter scene, children skating on a pond. Inside, taped carefully, was a photograph. Me at 6 years old, standing in front of the same house I now guarded, my mother's arm around my shoulders. Below it, in Layla Sip's neat script, were 4 words: "Family is memory, Danny." I sat at the dining table, staring at the photograph. The boy in the picture looked trusting, innocent. He had no idea the same people who smiled for holiday cards would someday try to erase his mind and steal his legacy. I whispered to the boy in the photo and to myself, "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." And I gave myself back. I closed the card, slid it into my ledger as the final entry, and set the book on the mantel beside my mother's photo, not as evidence anymore, but as testament. The house exhaled with me. The fire glowed brighter, and outside snow kept falling, covering the past in silence. And that was the true gift of Christmas Eve, not what I received, but what I reclaimed.